This is Alan in Massachusetts. McCarthy, you're the man. They have to pay Gonzalez. Kraft is being cheap. He needs to pay Gonzalez. That's the end of it.
Alan in Massachusetts, maybe my favorite call in the history of the program because he likes me.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care what else he said, but yeah, I am the man. I'm Matt McCarthy. She's Lucy Burge. It's Boston's entered the chat. Now entering the chat from Patriots.com, a true football freak, like a degenerate, a person who lives, breathes, eats the sport, the great Evan Lazar. Joining us on the program. Evan, thanks for staying up late with us, my man.
Of course, anytime, guys. How we doing?
Thank you, Evan.
We're doing great. All reports indicate the Patriots did pretty well today. Is that true? Hit us with it. You were there?
Yeah, I thought it was a good day, especially for the offense. And I just keep going back to that practice 2 years ago that we all watched with the Eagles in 2024. And the Patriots, that was one of the most one-sided joint practices I've ever seen. The Eagles, that they went on to win the Super Bowl that year, they just put a hurting on the Patriots, especially the Patriots offensive line. And the Eagles defensive line was just a total JV varsity situation. Now the Patriots have A.J. Brown and Milton Williams on their side, and that's always good. And they were able to at least, I would say, hold their own, if not win today's practice, if you're into that sort of thing. So that was encouraging, I would say, overall. For me to see the difference 2 years makes, not only just from the players that are on the field, but also the way the practice unfolded.
Yeah, so as you said, you would say, of course, no one wins or loses a practice, but that the Patriots would have won, should that be the case. Were there any specific players for the Patriots that you would say won the day?
Well, I mean, Drake Maye and A.J. Brown were great. I had them 3 for 3 in 11 on 11s. I'm not a big 7 on 7s fan, guys. The football is played with a pass rush and an offensive line, right? So, but looking at the 11 on 11s, just a couple of downfield completions really stood out to A.J. Brown. The crossing route early on in the practice, just pinpoint accuracy around Reek Woolen coming over the middle of the field. And then the beautiful teardrop that Drake Maye threw over A.J. Brown's outside shoulder. Some debate amongst the media whether or not he would have gotten it off with Jihad Campbell in his face on a blitz, but I think it was a back foot, throw it quickly at the top of the drop to A.J. Brown that really was a great throw and catch on both sides of that one. So the two of those guys put on a little bit of show. May also had a nice downfield completion to Romeo Doubs later on in practice down the left sideline. So when you see those types of downfield throws, it does make you feel encouraged that May is being protected pretty well.
I'm not asking you to rank this, Evan, but I guess I'm asking you to rank this. Where would you put the Drake Maye, A.J. Brown connection on the list of the stories of camp? It feels like it's one of the stories of today. It feels like every day I'm hearing about the Brown-Maye connection. How high on the list, roughly, would you put it?
Yeah, I think in terms of encouraging things, it's right near the top. And I would add Romeo Doubs into that as well. I was a little bit concerned with Romeo Doubs earlier on in training camp. It was a little bit of a slower burn for him in terms of, developing within this offense and getting his feet wet and comfortable in the offense. And now all of a sudden, for the last, let's say, week plus, he's been a playmaker for Drake Maye. And he had another really good grab today that I just mentioned. So I think the two of them coming together, Brown and Doubs, and forming a duo that we all sort of envisioned when they traded for A.J. Brown in June, that has really started to pick up steam over the last, let's call it 5 practices, which is extremely encouraging. And like I said, I think the other part that's been encouraging is that the pass protection for the offensive line now in 2 separate joint practices against the Colts and Eagles has been respectable, has been good. So I think that those are things that you were looking for or hoping for by the end of camp. We were going to be talking about this new wide receiver duo being a prolific duo for Drake Maye, an improvement from the offensive line, whether it was internal improvement with Campbell and Wilson or Elijah Vera Tucker stepping in and making that whole group better.
From what you saw after practice, what were the interactions like between A.J. Brown and his former teammates on the Eagles?
Yeah, it's funny. I thought Milton Williams was holding court a little bit longer, and he
Seemed
had
like it.
a picture with all the defensive linemen there. AJ Brown definitely had some teammates come over, but he was asked after practice if he's talked to Jalen Hurts, and he said flat out no. Like one word answer, no. So you make that of what you will, but it was an interesting dynamic because the Patriots, like I just said, 2 years ago, it was the opposite. It was AJ Brown making plays on the Patriots defense and Milton Williams blowing up the Patriots offensive line. And now those guys are on the other side. So there was quite a few former Eagles in this practice, Matt Collins, Kevin Byard, and both of those guys. So they all talked after practice, and I thought that was interesting.
Let's talk about the trenches, which was the story of that joint practice 2 years ago, as you alluded to, Evan. The reporting I read today suggested the Patriots were pretty good. Their offensive line was pretty good against a stout Eagles front. What did you see?
Yeah, I was just looking for them to kind of survive this matchup, to be honest with you, Matt, because it's a great Eagles front, and they don't have Jonathan Greenard out there yet. He's on PUP, but they still have the two guys in the middle with Davis and Carter and Nolan Smith, and Jalen Hunt's kind of an underrated player who's pretty good off the edge as well. And I thought the Patriots did that. I thought they held their own. Campbell had some reps that he probably would want back in this practice, but overall was okay. And the guy inside that really stood out to me was Jared Wilson at center. He had 2 reps against Jordan Davis in one-on-ones where he stonewalled Jordan Davis both times. And that's a 340-pound defensive tackle that Jared Wilson's going up against. And I think we've all had some concerns about Wilson against bigger, more powerful guys on the inside. And I thought that they were able to move Jordan Davis a couple of times. So that was encouraging. The running game was, not the X plays that as Vrabel calls them, the explosive plays in the running game, but I thought that they were able to grind out some yards and, 5-6 yards at a pop at some points with Ramondre Stevenson, again, against a front that doesn't give up a whole lot on the ground. So that was encouraging to see, especially from an offensive line that we're all a little bit, have question marks about, I would say, across the board.
You said okay for Will Campbell today. What's been your assessment of him in camp so far?
I think he's been terrific up until this point, honestly. Today was probably the one day where I thought Hunt got him a few times, got him in one-on-ones, got him again in team. But up until this point, he's been dominant in Patriots practices where we are starting to question, is this about the Patriots edge rushers, right? Like, is this something about what's going on the other side? But last week against the Colts, he was really good too against Arden Key and Leitu Latu. So, he's had some really good practices this summer. He looks stronger. He looks confident, looks healthy. He looks like he's varied his techniques and changed up his techniques a little bit more well schooled in that regard. So I've been really happy with what I've seen from Will Campbell. I thought today, was more so, but in overall, I think he's had a really good summer.
How did Vrabel look when he got into the middle of that fight to either try to break it up or keep it going? I don't know what his mindset was because he wants to keep playing and be in the middle of this stuff. How did he do you think?
Evan, before you answer that, can I take a guess? He looked so extraordinarily happy to jump into that fracas. Is that how he looked?
I'm going to say that he's trying to break it up, though. Okay, I don't think he's trying to go the other direction. But we've seen that before. Last summer, remember he had the bloody cheek or whatever jumping in there in a joint practice as well. So I don't know. I think he's just trying to, he said to us last year, I think that he doesn't think that he thinks the players are going to stop fighting if they see a coach in the middle of it, right? So he tries to get himself in the middle of it to break the whole thing up. But that was the one kerfuffle of practice. And I know yesterday, I think it was the Cowboys, and I can't remember who the other team was, but they had 6 fights or something like that in their joint practice yesterday. So one little skirmish today, and that was about it. So it was pretty tame for a joint practice.
Nobody was happier to get that bloody lip last year than Mike Vrabel after jumping into that. Again, he's trying to break it up, but he's a football player.
Yeah, he's running up and down the sideline with them in the first couple games of the season. He wants to be out there. We know.
Yeah, exactly.
He's breaking it up.
That was the best. That's the shot of the season, in my opinion. It's him running down the sideline with Antonio Gibson in Miami on that kickoff return. Was an awesome shot by David Silverman, one of our photographers.
So you did mention, there was one little skirmish, kerfuffle, whatever you want to call it. Do you expect the Eagles to bounce back tomorrow? What I find so interesting, Evan, about these joint practices is when there's a second day. The Patriots, say, for example, their wide receivers got the best of the Colts defensive backs last week. Well, you don't get to see the Colts bounce back the next day because there was only one joint practice, or try to bounce back the next day. This is an Eagles team that has won a Super Bowl just a couple years ago. There are competitors on that team. Do you expect better from the Eagles tomorrow? And do the Patriots need to be ready for a better day from the Eagles tomorrow?
Yeah, and I think that's the best part about, like you said, having these back-to-back joint practices. The Patriots had them last year in Minnesota, and I thought it was like the same kind of thing. It was sort of a split decision. One team won one day, one team won the other day, sort of thing. So I think that that's the best part of this. And if I'm the Patriots, though, I'm going in thinking that there's still meat on the bone for what they did out there. I thought defensively, early on in the practice, especially, Saquon Barkley gashed them a few times on the ground, and so did Shipley, the running back from Clemson. He had a few bounces out on the outside, looking like Kenneth Walker in the Super Bowl. So those are going to be things that I'm sure the coaches this afternoon talk to the defense about shoring up going into tomorrow's practice. So I still think that there's still room for improvement from a Patriots standpoint, especially defensively, where I thought at times, they gave up some running yards. I also thought that Jalen Hurts pushed the ball down the field better in the beginning part of practice. Then when we got into the situational stuff at the end with the 2-minute drill, the Patriots really started to heat up Jalen Hurts and bringing blitzes and pressure from the safeties especially, and they were getting home with those blitzes and gave the Eagles a lot of problems. But earlier on in practice, I thought that the Eagles offensive line was controlling the line of scrimmage. So I still would like to see a little bit more pressure and a little bit more stout run defense from the Patriots defense. So that's what I'm looking for tomorrow, is if that unit, especially the defensive line, can bounce back a little bit.
We've spent a lot of this summer talking about the Patriots pass rush as maybe the deficiency for this team defensively. How much do we need to start talking about that run defense? Had Alex Barth on the radio earlier today, and he said, hey, Matt, just keep an eye out for this. The Colts probably won in the running game. The Eagles won in the running game today. Should I be concerned about this, Evan? Yes or no?
A little bit, yeah. I would say yes. I think that what we've seen is that it's a little bit of a combination of outside and inside, which always is a little bit concerning because it's not just one area. And then, we talked about it today on our show. It's just they had these visits yesterday with Daquan Jones and Shaq Thompson, and you see some of these leaky run defense practices, and then you bring in a nose tackle and an inside linebacker for visits and free agent visits. So that tells me that maybe, they see some of those similar things as well. So Barkley's a great runner. This is a great Eagles offensive line. By most consider it a top 5 offensive line in football. So it's not totally shocking that they were able to open up some holes. But the one silver lining or hope I have is that Christian Barmore wasn't a full participant. So he wasn't in there in a lot of those run periods. So maybe, getting him next to Milton Williams and Corey Durden would shore up things there in the middle. But it's certainly something that I didn't love seeing, and especially those runs I was talking about just a second ago is Shipley bouncing off the edges and getting the corner. I mean, we saw that, in February a little bit too much in the Super Bowl. So hopefully they can figure some of those things out.
So Christian Gonzalez has not been at practice, Evan, and his contract situation, as Schefter said, is not close with the Patriots. What do you think happens with this? Are they going to pay Christian Gonzalez?
I think they ultimately do. Normally these types of things, and this is just a guess, but normally these types of things come down to payment schedule, right? Like, when's the guaranteed money actually being paid? And when it comes to Witherspoon or Derek Stingley, those guys got the bag immediately. They got that 2-year, $59 million, I think it was, for Devin Witherspoon in Seattle in years 4 and 5 of that contract. And I think that's usually where this sort of haggling comes in the negotiation is, are you getting the money up front, or are you going to get the money at the back end of the contract? And so that would be my guess as to what's going on right now with Christian Gonzalez, and the Patriots Patriots and trying to figure out how to negotiate that. So we'll see how that goes. But I think they have this framework now with Witherspoon where the contract is more or less basically outlined for them. Maybe Gonzalez just gets paid a little bit extra than what Witherspoon did as the next guy to sign. But we saw this happen with Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, where Bijan Robinson signs, and I think it was like a day later that the Lions signed Jahmyr Gibbs because the contract's done at that point. The Seattle kind of did the negotiation for them. So I'm hoping that this gets done. I'm hoping that Gonzalez gets out there at least a little bit before the game against Seattle. But overall, I think he can probably step back in and play at a pretty high level.
Evan Lazar joining us. Patriots were pretty good defensively today in the secondary, picking off, 5 interceptions or something of Jalen Hurts, 5 turnovers. What did you see from that unit?
Yeah, some of those came in 7-on-7, so that you always put that in there. But I think that the overall performance of the secondary was okay when they got pressure with those blitzes, and I think the end of practice was encouraging. You had Kevin Byard breaking up a pass, you had Christian Ellis breaking up a pass, but it's fun that we're at this point with the Patriots where the fourth cornerback and the backup guard and the maybe interior run defense, like these are the concerns that we're talking about now with this team. We've come a long way from talking about the quarterback and the left tackle and not having any receivers. But I would say, the depth at cornerback is something that remains to be seen if they have enough boundary corner depth. Charles Woods, Kendall Vildor had a pick today in the 2-minute. That was a nice play. Karan Prunty, the rookie they drafted in the 5th round. Those are the guys that are getting a lot of the run there for Gonzalez, who's not been practicing mostly. So I think that that's a big question mark still with this team is depth at corner behind that top 3 of Gonzalez, Davis, and Marcus Jones. If one of those guys gets hurt and somebody needs to come off the bench and play significant snaps for this defense, can they get serviceable play from one of those players?
Evan, before we let you go, how you feeling about the kicker?
Better today. I think the one thing, just from my vantage point with the kicker, is that Borgales seems to be missing the same way. And so he's the ball is drifting on him from right to left. He missed wide left all 3 times in the game last week. So in theory, you would think that that's a mechanics thing that they could break down on the tape and figure out why he's yanking the ball to his left. Barth mentioned maybe a little bit of over kicking, trying to kick the ball too hard, and that would swing your foot, the other way. So maybe there's something like that going on with him. I'm not a mechanics kicking expert, but it is notable to me that he's missing wide left every single time. So hopefully that's just a little tweak with his mechanics to get him back center, and they'll be fine. I'll give him this. He made 2 50-plus yarders at the end of practice today. One was a 57-yard field goal that he made at the very end of the session. So that was good to see. And I think it's nothing to do with, power or anything like that. I think right now he's just pulling the ball a little bit, and hopefully they can figure that out.
You're not a kicking mechanics expert yet, Evan. Maybe not today. But maybe tomorrow. Go watch some film. Evan, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. I know it's late. You got to be out there early for practice tomorrow morning. We appreciate you and your expertise always. Check him out, Catch22, Patriots.com. Does a million things with our friend Alex Barth. He's the best in the business. Evan Lazar joining us. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you, Evan.
No problem, guys. Thank you.
Always good to have Evan on the program. 617-582-CHAT. You worried about the kicker?
I am not worried about the kicker. However, I came into that not worried. Now I don't know. If he's missing in the same way each time, worried about Borgales.
You would think it would just be mechanical, but also my golf game, I miss the same way every time. That's not mechanical. That's all in my head. So let's not just jump to the conclusion that it's all mechanical. Gotta have some things going on up there. That's for sure. I don't want my kicker messed up here.
No. You got one job. You got to be able to do it.
Kick the ball. Yep. Gotta put it through the uprights.
Yes.
Exactly. Not just the skinny uprights, the wide uprights. What's trending in the world of sports? We do this, right? We go around the world of sports. That is what we'll do next on Boston's Entered the Chat. Matt McCarthy, Lucy Burge, and you. Look at that.
Beautiful.
That's over at the Garden. That building didn't exist when I was a kid.
When you had your let up shoes.